the physicality. We even talked about it pregame. How disruptive maybe was that to both maybe the flow and what both teams were trying to do and find their rhythm out there?
Yeah, I mean, I think it was a physical game. You know, I think there's a double standard in how people get their calls. I think Kelsey Mitchell, number one, is held or chucked on every freaking possession and never gets a call off the ball. I think Aliyah Boston is the worst officiated post player in the league. She never gets a call. And you know, there's a double standard there, certainly. But you know, again, if it's going to be physical and you're gonna allow us to be physical, then allow both teams to be physical.
Aliyah Boston has never been one to shy away from a challenge. But what happened in the Fever's matchup against the Dallas Wings pushed her to a breaking point. In a game where Indiana clawed back from a huge deficit despite missing their entire point guard rotation, everything came down to the final minutes. What should have been a hard-fought victory turned into a night filled with confusion, frustration, and accusations that the officiating tilted the scales. The cameras caught it, the fans saw it, and Boston herself didn't hold back afterward, delivering blunt words that left no doubt about how she felt. This wasn't just another regular season game. It was a showcase of resilience overshadowed by questionable calls and a closing stretch that had Fever players, coaches, and fans demanding answers. And when Boston spoke, it sent a message that could echo for the rest of the season.
If you're going to call the holds and you're going to call the chucks, and you're going to then call it both ways. So, I mean, I think that we've been pretty consistent in what we're asking for. And I didn't feel like it was consistent, especially for those two. I think you could call a foul every time down the floor for those two.
For Indiana, the road to this boiling moment started long before the opening tip against Dallas. In the span of a single night against Phoenix, the Fever's backcourt was gutted. Sydney Colson went down with a torn left ACL, ending her season. On the spot, minutes later, Ari McDonald fractured a bone in her right foot, joining Colson on the season-ending injury list. Both were supposed to be the floor generals, the voices that set the pace, broke defensive pressure, and controlled possessions. When the game tightened, it was a complete collapse of the team's ball-handling structure. The timing could not have been worse. Caitlin Clark, the rookie phenom and primary playmaker, had already been sidelined. With a groin injury, suddenly, Indiana wasn't just shorthanded, they were without their top 3 point guards for the first time all season. That left a massive void in both strategy and confidence.
What kind of led to the disorganization that you saw on the offensive end tonight?
Well, all of our point guards are injured. I think that's the first thing. You know, and again, it's one of those things. Dallas turned up the pressure. I mean, defensively, they made it a little bit more difficult for us to bring down the ball and initiate offense, and became a little bit more disruptive. And you know, we're working Odyssey into what we do, but still, it's tough because point guards are the ones who get you organized.
Without a steady hand to initiate the offense, every possession was now a gamble. Breaking full-court traps became an exhausting ordeal. Clean entry passes into the post turned into contested scrambles. The margin for error shrank to nothing. The ripple effect was immediate.
And there were times where we weren't organized. There were times where we were over-dribbling, got away from, you know, our off-ball actions and went straight to trying to go one-on-one, and that's when we're not successful or as successful as we can be.
Dallas, a team that thrives on pressure defense, pounced on the opportunity. From the opening quarter, they extended their guards beyond the three-point line, forcing Indiana's remaining ball handlers to initiate plays from uncomfortable spots. Traps came early, passing lanes vanished, and what should have been simple half-court sets dissolved into rushed, off-balance attempts. It wasn't just physical fatigue, it was mental erosion. Every trip down the floor carried the weight of signing veteran guard Odyssey Sims to a hardship contract. In 13 minutes of play, she finished scoreless with 2 assists and a turnover, a reflection of just how steep the adjustment was. This wasn't about her ability. Indiana's most dangerous scorer, who now had to run the offense from start to finish. Every inbound went through her. Every possession started with her breaking pressure, and every defensive trap was designed to wear her down. It was a role change that pulled her away from her natural strengths, but there was no other choice. By the time the game reached its middle stretch, it was clear this was not going to be a high-scoring shootout. It was going to be a grind, possession by possession, mistake by mistake. And the more Indiana fought to stay within reach, the more the cracks in their makeshift backcourt started to show. The stage was set. All that was left was for tensions and tempers to boil. From the moment the ball was tipped, Dallas smelled weakness. They knew Indiana's backcourt was running on emergency power, and they wasted no time turning that vulnerability into a weapon. Every possession for the Fever began under duress. The Wings pushed their defensive line higher, cutting off passing lanes before the Fever could even cross half court. It wasn't just about forcing mistakes, it was about making Indiana uncomfortable in every single phase of their offense. The result was a flood of turnovers. 17 giveaways in total, and Dallas made sure to cash them in, converting them into 27 points. That's over a quarter of their offense coming directly from Indiana's miscues. Each turnover felt heavier than the last because it wasn't just a lost possession, it was an open invitation for Dallas to run the floor, score in transition, and keep the Fever chasing from behind, without their natural ball handlers. Indiana's offensive flow looked like it was stuck in mud. Sets that normally took 10 seconds to initiate now dragged to the last few ticks of the shot clock. Kelsey Mitchell, the team's scoring anchor, was working double shifts, bringing the ball up against traps, then trying to create her own shot against fresh defenders. That constant tug-of-war drained her energy, making it harder to finish plays with the same explosiveness fans are used to seeing. The Wings weren't just guarding players, they were hunting them. The moment Mitchell crossed midcourt, she had a second defender flashing in her peripheral vision. Sophie Cunningham and Aliyah Boston, both capable scorers, struggled to get the ball in their spots because Dallas was disrupting the entry passes. The Fever's possessions turned into survival drills, relying on individual skill just to get a decent look at the rim. Then there was the mental aspect. Dallas played with a confidence that said, "We know you can't sustain this pace." Every time Indiana clawed back within striking distance, the Wings answered with a quick run fueled by pressure defense. It was a constant gut punch, 2 steps forward, 3 steps back. Odyssey Sim's presence was supposed to help relieve some of that tension. But with just one practice under her belt, she was still learning her teammates' tendencies. She often found herself hesitating, trying to guess where players wanted the ball, giving Dallas's precious extra seconds to close passing lanes. Her effort was there, but the rhythm was missing. And against a team like Dallas, rhythm is everything. By the time the second half began, the pattern was set. Dallas would push the tempo, Indiana would scramble to adjust, and any mistake would be punished immediately. The Fever were still in the fight, but the toll was mounting. This wasn't just a basketball game anymore, it was a battle of attrition, and the Wings were making sure Indiana felt every second of it. The question wasn't whether the Fever could score, it was whether they could survive long enough to give themselves a chance in the fourth quarter. If there was one player who carried Indiana through the storm, it was Kelsey Mitchell. Known primarily as a pure scorer, Mitchell had built her reputation on finding gaps, hitting shots under pressure, and delivering in clutch moments. But against Dallas, her responsibilities went far beyond putting the ball in the basket. She was now the floor general, the primary ball handler, and the main scoring option, all rolled into one: a job. Description that would test even the most seasoned veterans. From the opening minutes, it was clear that every Dallas defender knew exactly where to focus their energy. The moment Mitchell touched the ball, traps formed like storm clouds. Guards met her before half-court, Wings collapsed into passing lanes, and the Dallas bigs rotated aggressively to deny her any clean looks inside. It wasn't just a defensive scheme, it was a full-scale containment strategy. Despite that, Mitchell managed to produce. She finished with 24 points on 7 of 15 shooting, knocking down 4 triples and grabbing 6 rebounds. But those numbers don't tell the full story. Nearly every possession began with her breaking a trap, navigating double teams, and trying to set up an offense without a true point guard beside her. The physical effort alone was draining. The mental strain was worse. One wrong read, one misjudged pass, and Dallas would be sprinting the other way for easy points. Yet Mitchell never backed down. In the second half, with the Fever facing a double-digit deficit, she hit a deep 3 from several feet beyond the arc, then immediately turned to her teammates and signaled for them to lock in defensively. It was a leadership moment, the kind that shifts energy on the floor. Minutes later, She initiated a pick-and-roll with Aliyah Boston, threading a perfect bounce pass for an easy layup. Those plays were more than highlights. They were survival tactics, keeping Indiana's hopes alive in a game that could have slipped away at any moment. Still, the toll was obvious. By the fourth quarter, Mitchell was fighting fatigue, her legs heavy from carrying the ball up the floor, possession after possession. Dallas sensed it and turned up the pressure even more. Some possessions ended in forced shots, others in turnovers, when passing lanes closed before she could react. But no matter how relentless the Wings became, Mitchell kept attacking. She was the engine that kept the Fever moving, the voice in huddles demanding focus, and the player everyone looked to when the game hung in the balance. In the closing minutes, with the Fever within one possession, she was still initiating plays, still looking for ways to break Dallas's defense. It wasn't the role she was built for, but on this night, she owned it. And without her, Indiana never would have been in position for the dramatic ending that was about to unfold. While Kelsey Mitchell carried the heaviest load, the Fever's fight against Dallas was never a one-woman show. Around her, several players stepped into larger roles, each delivering moments that kept Indiana's hopes alive. They weren't always the top scorers, but their contributions were the glue holding the comeback together. Sophie Cunningham was one of the emotional sparks. She poured in 14 points on 5 VF10 shooting, including 2 triples that came at critical junctures. Every basket was punctuated with her trademark edge, diving for loose balls, barking after contact, and refusing to be intimidated. Energy wasn't just about scoring. It was contagious, pulling teammates into the fight. At one point, she had a heated exchange with officials after what she felt was an inconsistent call, though she later apologized publicly for her reaction. She stood by her frustration, reflecting the team's boiling emotions. Then there was Chloe Bybee, who made the most of her limited minutes. In just 12 minutes on the floor, she scored 11 points, hitting all 3 of her attempts from deep. One of those threes came during a Dallas push that threatened to put the game out of reach. Instead, her shot forced the Wings into a timeout, giving Indiana a breather and the momentum to mount a run. It was a dagger at exactly the right time, a reminder that even short stints can change the flow of a game. Natasha Howard provided the inside presence that balanced Indiana's attack. Her 12-point, 12-rebound double-double came with 3 blocks, each one erasing what should have been easy Dallas points. She anchored the defense, making the Wings think twice before driving into the paint. Her ability to control the boards also limited Dallas's second-chance opportunities, keeping Indiana within striking distance. Aliyah Boston, battling constant contact in the post, added 14 points while providing the physicality needed to match Dallas's bruising style. Every trip inside was a war, yet she kept going back, forcing the Wings to defend honestly and preventing them from overloading on the perimeter. Lexi Hull didn't score, but her defensive assignment was one of the toughest, chasing Paige Buchers through screens, contesting every angle and disrupting passing lanes. While her work won't show up in highlight reels, it played a role in slowing Dallas during Indiana's comeback push. Together, these contributions created a platform for what could have been a statement win. The Fever outscored Dallas 25-4 in the fourth quarter, clawing their way back from the edge. The arena's energy shifted. The momentum was theirs, and for a brief stretch, it looked like they were about to pull off the kind of gritty victory that defines a season. But that momentum, earned through hustle, teamwork, and resilience, was about to collide with light game decisions and officiating moments that would overshadow everything the Fever had built. The fight wasn't over, but the endgame would be decided in a way no one on the court could have predicted. After 3 quarters of trading blows and clawing back from a double-digit deficit, the Fever had positioned themselves for a chance to steal the win. The comeback was fueled by defensive grit and timely shooting, and the crowd inside the arena could feel the momentum tipping their way. But as the clock wound down, the most critical sequence of the night would unfold, and it would leave Indiana wondering what could have been done. With just 11.7 seconds left, the Fever secured a defensive rebound, trailing by a single point. Still had a timeout in their pocket, the kind of resource coaches save for exactly this type of situation. Yet, instead of stopping play to drop a set, head coach Stephanie White opted to let her team push the ball in transition. At first, it seemed like the gamble might work. Kelsey Mitchell had the ball in her hands. and she's the player Indiana trusts most in clutch moments. But Dallas wasn't caught sleeping. The Wings swarmed Mitchell, forcing her to take a tightly contested jumper in transition. The shot missed, and Dallas grabbed the rebound. Only then, with just 1.7 seconds remaining, did White call for a timeout. By that point, there wasn't enough time to design or execute a meaningful play. The window had slammed shut in her postgame comments. White didn't sugarcoat the decision. "I probably should have used it at the 3-second mark," she admitted. It was a rare public acknowledgement from a coach that a tactical mistake may have cost the team the game. And it wasn't just any game. This was a matchup against a bottom 3 Dallas squad, the kind of opponent Indiana needed to beat to solidify their playoff standing. The frustration was palpable. Players exchanged looks on the bench, the crowd groaned in disbelief, and the energy that had been building throughout the fourth quarter seemed to vanish. The Fever had fought through injuries, turnovers, and relentless defensive pressure, only to watch their opportunity slip away because of a split-second hesitation. To the fans, it felt avoidable. With a timeout, Indiana could have advanced the ball, set a high percentage action for Mitchell or Boston, and forced Dallas to defend without the advantage of transition chaos. Instead, the possession became a scramble, dictated by Dallas's defense rather than Indiana's design. What made it sting even more was that the EFR had done the hard part. They'd outscored the Wings 25-4 in the fourth quarter, erased a deficit that looked insurmountable, and put themselves one shot away from a signature win. But in the space of those final seconds, the narrative flipped from resilience to regret. And yet, as costly as the late-game decision was, it wasn't the only reason Indiana walked away empty-handed. A second controversy, one that had been simmering all night, was about to take center stage. The officiating in this game didn't just frustrate the Fever. It left them feeling like the scales had been tipped against them from the start. If the final possession left fans shaking their heads, the officiating throughout the night had them fuming. From the opening quarter, the whistle felt unpredictable. And by the time the game reached its tense closing stretch, several high-impact calls or non-calls had shifted the momentum in ways the Fever couldn't ignore. One of the most glaring moments came in the fourth quarter. Aliyah Boston, fighting for position under the rim, had her arm visibly clamped by the Dallas center. Instead of calling the hold, officials whistled Boston for the foul. The play went to review, and broadcasters fully expected the call to be overturned. Rebecca Lobo, on the national feed, even remarked that it was as clear as it gets for an offensive foul on Dallas. Yet, the ruling stood. Not only did Indiana lose the challenge, but they also forfeited a crucial timeout in the process, a resource that would loom large minutes later. Then came the flagrant foul sequence involving Sophie Cunningham and Paige Bucher. Cunningham was called for a flagrant after a closeout, with officials citing a landing space violation. The irony: earlier in the game, Buchers had committed a nearly identical play on the other end that was also upgraded to a flagrant. When Kelsey Mitchell absorbed similar contact on a jump shot, there was no whistle at all. For the Fever, the inconsistency was glaring, and the frustration was boiling over. There was also the physical off-ball defense on Mitchell, which has been a talking point all season. She's often bumped, held, or outright shoved before even receiving a pass, yet rarely gets the call. Against Dallas, it was no different. Every cut she made seemed to come with extra contact, and yet the whistle stayed silent. On one particularly frustrating possession, cameras caught Paige Buchers shoving Sophie Cunningham into Natasha Howard to create space for an open shot. The contact was obvious on replay, but the foul was called on Cunningham instead. Plays like that didn't just cost Indiana points, they chipped away at the team's composure. By the time the fourth quarter wound down, the Fever weren't just battling the Wings, they were battling the officiating. Stephanie White, normally measured in her public comments, didn't hold back afterward. She told reporters that Kelsey Mitchell was held or chucked on every possession and called Boston the worst officiated post player in the league. It was a blunt, pointed critique that left no doubt about her feelings. For the Fever, these moments weren't isolated mistakes. They were game-altering events that took the ball out of their hands, disrupted momentum, and ultimately contributed to the narrow one-point loss. And for Boston, who had been at the center of the most controversial call of the night, The frustration wasn't just professional, it was personal. That set the stage for the raw, unfiltered reaction she delivered post-game, a message that resonated with teammates, fans, and anyone who felt the game had been taken out of Indiana's control. When the final buzzer sounded, the scoreboard showed an 81-80 loss. But for Aliyah Boston and the Fever, the sting went deeper than the numbers. They had battled through injuries, relentless Dallas pressure, and a fourth-quarter comeback that should have sealed the game only to see it undone by a mix of late-game mismanagement and officiating decisions they believed were stacked against them. Boston, normally calm and measured in her public remarks, stepped to the podium and delivered a statement that left little room for interpretation. "We need better focus," she said. Just for words, but loaded with meaning. To some, it was self-critique, a call for the Fever to execute more sharply in crucial moments. To others, it was a pointed jab at the external chaos that disrupted their rhythm, including what she saw as inconsistent officiating. That dual message captured the tension perfectly, acknowledging the team's responsibility while refusing to ignore the obstacles thrown in their way. Stephanie White echoed the sentiment, but with far more bluntness. She called out what she described as a double standard in how the league's stars are officiated. Kelsey Mitchell is held or chucked on every possession and never gets a call off the ball, she told reporters. Aliyah Boston is the worst officiated post player in the league. She never gets a call. Her words weren't just frustration in the moment, they were an indictment of a pattern she's been seeing all season. The emotional toll of the game was visible. Sophie Cunningham had to walk away from an official after shouting in frustration, later apologizing but standing by the point she was making. Even Caitlin Clark, sidelined with a groin injury, joined in the silent protest, clapping forcefully in the direction of referee Amy Bonner as the teams left the court. On the sideline, Boston stepped between White and an official during a heated exchange, her expression a mix of anger and disbelief. For Boston, the night had been physically punishing. Every post touch came with heavy contact. She'd absorbed elbows, had her arms pinned, and fought through double teams without the whistle blowing in her favor. To then be called for a foul in the arm clamp incident, one she felt was textbook. Illegal defense by her opponent was the breaking point. Her statement wasn't just about one game. It was about the accumulation of nights where she's felt the whistle hasn't protected her, and where the physicality allowed on one end hasn't been matched on the other. In a league pushing for parity and fair play, Boston's words carried weight. They weren't an outburst. They were a warning, and with the Fever now sliding in the standings, the stakes for every remaining game are even higher. Boston's challenge to her team, and perhaps to the league, was clear. Fix the focus, demand the standard, and don't let anyone else dictate the outcome. The question was whether that message would ignite a rally, or mark the start of a bigger fight. The loss to Dallas wasn't just another game in the schedule, it was a gut punch that could have ripple effects for the rest of the Fever's season. On paper, the Wings are a bottom three team, more concerned with draft position than making a playoff run. For Indiana, this was a must-win opportunity, the kind of matchup that could have given them breathing room in the standings. Instead, they walked away with a one-point defeat, dropping them to sixth place and tightening the postseason race with only a handful of games left. The margin for error is now razor-thin. Every remaining game is essentially a playoff game before the playoffs even begin. The Fever can't afford another slip-up against teams they're expected to beat, and the schedule ahead doesn't do them any favors. Matchups against top-tier opponents will test their depth, discipline, and mental toughness, especially if officiating continues to be a talking point for the fan base. The Dallas loss reopened old wounds. Some are calling for Stephanie White's job, pointing to the late-game timeout hesitation as proof she isn't the right coach to lead this roster. Others argue that White has navigated an almost impossible season, holding the team in playoff position despite losing her top 3-point guards and having to constantly shuffle lineups. The debate is loud, passionate, and unlikely to fade anytime soon. Then there's the Caitlin Clark factor. Still sidelined with a groin injury, Clark remains the X factor in Indiana's playoff hopes. The team expects her to return within weeks, but how quickly she can regain her form and how effectively she can mesh back into a roster that's been forced to adapt without her will be critical. Her presence could instantly change the Fever's offensive dynamics, taking pressure off Kelsey Mitchell and giving Aliyah Boston a more balanced attack inside. The question is whether Clark's return will come in time to reverse the damage done by losses like this one. Every missed opportunity chips away at the cushion Indiana might have had. And if they find themselves in a tiebreaker scenario at season's end, they'll look back at this Dallas game as one that got away, not because they were outplayed, but because of the combination of tactical missteps and officiating calls that went against them. For Boston, Mitchell, and the rest of the Fever, the message after the game was clear. The frustration is real, but it can't become an excuse. They'll need to turn the anger from this loss into urgency, using it as fuel for the battles ahead. Whether that means pushing through another stretch without Clark or rallying once she's back, the mission remains the same: survive the grind, secure the playoff spot, and make sure no one can question their fight. In the WNBA, momentum is everything. And for Indiana, the next few weeks will determine whether this season's story ends in redemption or regret. The Fever's narrow loss to Dallas will be remembered for more than the final score. It was a night where resilience collided with frustration, where a fourth-quarter rally worthy of headlines was instead overshadowed by late-game decisions and officiating calls that left Indiana feeling shortchanged. Aliyah Boston's blunt assessment and Stephanie White's pointed comments made it clear this wasn't just about one game, but about patterns they believe have hindered them all season. With the playoff race tightening and Caitlin Clark's return still on the horizon, Indiana faces a critical stretch where every possession, every call, and every coaching decision could decide their fate. The talent and fight are there, but the margin for error has vanished. Now, the Fever must channel their frustration into focus, turning moments like this into the fuel that pushes them over the line before time runs out.